Good afternoon, Internet. Good afternoon. Eric Arnold here. Oh, let me check, make sure the mic's on. Mic's on. Okay, very good. It's Tuesday, probably around 20 to 5, on the 21st April. Well, let's do some NFL draft here. I mean, we actually have a sporting event, if you want to call it that. There'll be no score kept, and you won't know who won when it's over, although everybody's going to tell you who won. But you really don't know. It's called the NFL Draft. Did I say that? The NFL Draft. NFL Draft is Thursday. Look, I'm not much of an NFL Draft guy. Yeah, I'm an NFL guy, and I'll put my knowledge of the NFL up against anybody. But the draft just doesn't do it for me because you just don't know. In other words, the ESPN will have their talking heads there, and they're going to tell me what was a great pick and what was a reach and what was a mistake, and they have no idea. Nobody does until, I would say, at least 3 years goes by, maybe more. And no one ever does that, unless it's some egregious, mistake Mel Kiper made that they want to make fun of him then because he called some, perennial Pro Bowler a joke, that type of thing. Hey, you get paid to make opinions on TV, you're going to make mistakes, so give Mel a break. What I've done here, and I don't think you're going to see this anywhere else, so pay attention. I've gone back through, using as my source, ProFootballReference.com, going back through the last 5 drafts, and each player selected, they assign a value to that player over the subsequent seasons that player has earned. In other words, and the value, it's an arbitrary value, in other words, I rush for 1,000 yards, that equates to so many points in value. I don't think it's like that. I think they just kind of eyeball it and go, he's about an average starter, give him an 8. The scale's generally a 1 to 20 scale. If you're the MVP, you probably got a 20 of approximate value that season. That's, I think, what they call it, approximate value, AB. If you were a Pro Bowler, you're probably a 15 to 18. And I'm doing this by memory. If you're just a run-of-the-mill starter, you're probably somewhere between, 8 and 10, 8 and 12. If you're a backup, you're in the single digits. If you hardly play at all, 1, 2, if you're in the special teams. So at any rate, what I did was I just went through who all was drafted by each team for the last 5 years. That would be 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and added it all up and decide which players drafted by which teams had the most approximate value of the players which they drafted. Now, I figure that's a pretty simplistic but perhaps useful way of determining which teams know what they're doing and which teams' draft picks haven't panned out. Plus, I think it's also somewhat of a useful item here to look at, get an idea of which teams now are old and hollowed out and ripe for a fall. If you got a team that hasn't hit on many draft picks in the last 5 years, well, then who the hell is making the plays on this team? It's got to be older veterans. It's got to be guys, in their upper 20s or even 30s. How much more shelf life do these guys have? So, without further ado, let's take a look at what we got here. Now, number 1 is Cleveland. And I almost hesitate to, I think that is simply a function of these guys being so terrible for the last several years and generating so many picks. I mean, they turned Carson Wentz into 1 or 2 or 3 number 1 picks. I don't think this is a function of these guys having drafted well. I don't think there's any question that Cleveland has more talent in that organization now than they did 5 years ago. Just by default, they're, almost by mistake accumulating some talent. But, it's not a well-run franchise. It hasn't been, it's not. They have brand new people involved right now. I wrote that down. Let's see. I always try to, well, I don't always, now that I'm more serious about doing this on a, how to say this, professional level. I'm trying to be a little more organized, if you will, as far as the organizations of the NFL teams is incredibly important, and it's incredibly overlooked. People usually, average bettor simply looks at players on the field and says, oh, I think that Patrick Mahomes is better than Baker Mayfield. Therefore, I'm going to bet on the Chiefs. Well, yeah, of course, and he may very well be better. But you also got to look at the overall organization. Is this team well run? Do the people running the team know what they're doing? You have to try to make an educated guess about that because that's incredibly important as to which teams are going to win or lose. Cleveland, owned by Jimmy Haslam, truck stop magnate. Not a big Jimmy fan. I do not like him. Andrew Berry, brand new GM. They've had musical chairs up there at GM. Basically musical everything up in Cleveland. As I said, it's not a well-run team, so they just simply keep putting a new person in every year and say good luck. Kevin Stefanski, I believe he's the offensive coordinator from the Vikings, I think. Another brand new coach. So, I'm not going to go through every last ownership person. That's just an example of, I do kind of know who these people are a little bit, or at least I've written it down. So I don't think I think that's skewed somewhat. Anyway, they're on top. But I think this is pretty instructive. You have Kansas City just won the Super Bowl. They're second. I mean, think about some of the players that are on that team that at the time they were drafted, nobody was going, wow! Like Tyreek Hill. He was later round, I don't think a first rounder. Patrick Mahomes, Andy, I think, went up to get him, and everybody's kind of like, that seems like a reach. Well, it does seem like a reach now. I know he hit a home run with Kareem Hunt before Hunt punched his way out of the league. That guy was a third or fourth rounder, and he tore up the league as a running back before, like I said, he got himself kicked out of the league. So Kansas City has done a great job of drafting. Baltimore, there was a reason everybody told you how great Ozzie Newsome was. Well, that's why. These are the players that they bring in, the guys on special teams, the guys that block, the guys that play linebacker, that keep a running back who gets through the line, hold him to a 5-yard gain instead of getting juked and it turning into a 25-yard gain. These little things that you don't really appreciate when you're watching a game. The depth of a team, very important. Indianapolis, New Orleans, they're always there, always good. Dallas, that seems like that one would surprise some people because everybody likes to make fun of old Jerry Jones. Probably one of the biggest hits in the draft in the past 5 years has been Dak Prescott. A starting quarterback, I'm going to say above average. I don't know how far above average, but he's definitely a quarterback you can roll out there and not get killed with. And they picked him up in the 4th round. So definitely they got a lot of value there when they got Prescott. The 49ers just lost the Super Bowl. Minnesota, one of the best teams against the spread. Pay attention. One of the best teams against the spread in the last several years, Minnesota Vikings. The Bears actually starting to get better. They're in your top 10. Here, this is interesting, I think. New England, down here at 15. And I think everybody would say, well, that's a little surprising. I mean, how good, they're so good. I mean, well, remember, they're picking at the end of the round every year because they always have a 12-4 record. So for them to be kind of in the middle of the pack with the great records they've had, you know, I think that's pretty good. You know, I think that there's nothing to be embarrassed about there. You know, towards the end here, I thought, you know, there's Pittsburgh. That's a little surprising to me. You know, I've always thought Pittsburgh was a pretty well-run team. I think they've suffered a little bit from what I just said about New England, is because they've had decent records. Probably they're near the end of the draft, end of the rounds every year. So that may have hurt them, but you know, that could be a team that's ripe for a fall here in the next few years. You know, you've got no quarterback. Roethlisberger's going to give it a try this year, and all this is predicated on there's going to be a season, of course. He'll probably be pretty good, believe it or not. You know, he'll probably be pretty good. So I don't know I'm going to automatically fade the Steelers this year. But it does seem like it could be a team that's being hollowed out. Now, they're the Eagles. I am a Philadelphia Eagle fan, in case this is the first time you've stumbled on this channel. Philadelphia Eagles have had terrible drafts in the last 5 years. But they won a Super Bowl. Now, how did that happen? And I'm still asking myself that question sometimes late at night in places I don't talk about at parties. I just kind of think that team got almost lucky, that 2017 season. It just feels like it was a one-hit wonder. I know these guys have mortgaged their drafts for, you know, this 5-year period is squarely in the Carson Wentz draft era, where they traded a bunch of picks to Cleveland for the right to get Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz has been very average, and they don't have a lot of other picks because they all went to Cleveland, so that could be why, you know, we have the low number. It's possible that's a team, you know, I didn't really, it's not really something I thought about until I did this exercise. It's very possible the Eagles are on the edge of a cliff about to fall off into 5-11, 4-12 territory. If their quarterback does not play well, that is a team that could take some big steps backwards because it's a shallow team. Not a real deep team right now, as you can see from the number of draft picks that have produced over the past 5 years. My story on that could change when I do a little more thinking and analysis of it, but that seems to be something that we can think about there. There's Arizona at the bottom. They picked the number 1 pick with a quarterback. Guy couldn't play at all, and I guess kudos to them. They turned right around and shipped him to Miami and just said, well, that's a mulligan. This guy they drafted, Kyler Murray, does look like he can play a little bit. So as Murray generates points over the next few years, they'll probably move up the standings. So I thought that was interesting, you know, to give you an idea as you're watching the draft Thursday, and these teams that come up, well, they're not coming up, nobody's coming up to any podiums, but as they say, on the clock, and you hear some of these teams in the top, you know, 10 or 15, then you might say, oh, okay, maybe I should pay attention to who they're picking, because they might have a half-decent idea who's good or not. And then, you know, the teams, and I think this generally flows with who's good and who's bad. You know, teams that can't draft, teams that miss repeatedly on their draft picks, generally are the bad teams in the league. It's not rocket science. Not rocket science. I thought this would be fun. I went into the 2015 NFL draft. Like I said, you have to step back a few years to see, who hit and who missed in these drafts. To take you into the Wayback Machine to set the scene, 2015, college football that year, that was Marcus Mariota. He was coming out, senior quarterback at Oregon. I believe he was a senior. I think a junior, was Jameis Winston from Florida State. Both those teams made the college playoff. Oregon beat the hell out of Winston's Florida State Seminoles in the semifinals, and then Marcus Mariota went on to get beat up by my Ohio State Buckeyes in the championship game, where he did not look good at all. And then here we have the draft. So the team that had the first pick was Tampa. Now I think that is an artificially high number there, skewed by the Jameis Winston pick. I would argue Jameis Winston's a bust. Because he was a starting quarterback, he generated lots of approximate value, but he wasn't a good quarterback. So I question Pro Football Reference's scale there a little bit. It's like, wait a minute, you're giving this guy a lot of value points, but he sucks. He's hurting the team. He's a loser. I would argue Winston has been a loser. Doesn't mean you're going to stay a loser, kid. I mean, you could right the ship. Where did he go? I'm not sure someone's signed him yet. I think he's still out there as a free agent. But Tampa's obviously decided, well, Tom Brady, we'll do that. So there was second. But Minnesota, who didn't have any kind of high round picks at all, they had the best draft, according to the total approximate value that came out of that draft. The Rams, who were just recently in a Super Bowl, they had a big number. New England, also in multiple Super Bowls since then, big number. Atlanta, they were in a Super Bowl, big number. Kansas City in a Super Bowl, they had a big number. So, you have one good draft, and it can set you up for a couple years if you can hook that up. And here are the worst teams. And again, there's Philadelphia. That's the outlier. The Eagles are the outlier. They're mixed in there with all these other non-playoff bad teams. And, I'm not sure how they pulled off the championship in 2017. Maybe my theory's all wrong. Maybe that's what that means. Or it means possibly that, you can build a winning team without the draft. I just think it's a hell of a lot harder. I mean, it just means you have to hit on so many of your free agent pickups or trades. I would think it's just easier to draft players that can help you and that can play. I think that is very much a way that you build a winning football team. So that's some things I've been thinking about here. Now I'd like to make another episode, hopefully get it out to you for tomorrow, where I guess I'll just maybe, like I said, I'm not a draft Nick. Perhaps I'll take a look at who's got the first 20 picks, and then I'll maybe look at who's the top 25, 30 players, and just give you an idea what I think of these 25, 30 players. I've always when I look at the players, I kind of look at it from who's the best player. I think Buddy Ryan, that's one of our favorite guys in Philadelphia. He was one of our better draft guys, if you will, in the past 40 years. I think that's the way he did it. Just give me the best player. I know I need a cornerback, but there's a 10-year all-pro offensive tackle sitting there, and I know that guy's going to be an all-pro. So why am I passing up that all-pro tackle, even though I got a couple tackles? He's better than them guys, and taking a risk on this cornerback that may or may not fill my hole. That's kind of how I look at it. I also look at it from the standpoint of conferences. Mel Kiper, good night. He must not sleep, I guess, because how does he review tape on thousands of college football players? I mean, I watch a lot of college football, but I'm watching the game, the overall game. I'm not watching individual players necessarily. Like, oh, he got juked on that one. Oh, he doesn't have good technique with his feet. Oh, he takes 2 steps to play the ball instead of no steps. I don't know this shit. I don't watch players. I'm watching kind of the overall scheme of the teams and how that turns out. So, I'll base some of my opinions on that. In other words, oh, here comes a defensive player from the Big 12. It's like, shit, I don't want that guy. I mean, they don't play any defense in the Big 12, so how good could he be? That sort of thing. So I'll try to do that, do a little preparation tomorrow and get a video out here for you, give you an idea of maybe 20 players or so that are probably slotted, in the top 25 or so, and maybe give you an idea if you have the thing on as to, what you're looking at. Give me an idea what I'm looking at. I probably wouldn't even watch the thing except, one of my subscribers suggested I do some draft content. Hey, I can't lie to you. I can't tell you I'm busy. So I guess I'll do some draft content. What time is it? All right. Well, that's enough of that. So let's meet again tomorrow, and we'll talk more draft. Eric Arnold from Me to You. Thanks for being here. Good afternoon.